My parents left me in the middle of my wedding and ghosted me for 5 years and now reached out. What do I do? TLDR, I'm married to my former boss. My parents did not take the marriage as well as I'd hoped and they ignored me for 5 years, only to reach out now after seeing a 5th anniversary Facebook post mentioning our kids. Do I let them back in, or do I ignore them? My husband, 30M, used to be my boss at my first real job, which is how we met about 9 years ago. We worked together for a couple of years and grew close while keeping things strictly professional. Eventually, our mutual attraction became impossible to ignore and we started dating, only after I was reassigned to a different supervisor by HR, because we wanted to do everything by the book. About a year into our relationship, I found out I was pregnant. We were already living together and completely committed to each other, so we decided to get married. We knew people might gossip that I was the young assistant who got knocked up by her boss, but the reality was that we loved each other deeply and we handled the situation responsibly at work. By the time we were engaged, I had actually left the company entirely. My new boss was a nightmare to work for, and pregnancy was the final push I needed to quit, so the work angle wasn't an issue anymore. Most of our friends and colleagues were happy for us. The only people I was really worried about were my parents. My parents, Dad 62M and Mom 57F, have always been overprotective, especially after we lost my older sister when I was a teenager. I knew they wouldn't love the idea of me dating, and now marrying, my former boss, so I hadn't told them about the relationship until I absolutely had to. Once we set a wedding date, I needed to break the news because I wanted them there. I sat them down and told them the truth, well, most of it. I explained how my husband and I fell in love and emphasized that our workplace romance had been handled professionally and that he had never taken advantage of me. I did not mention that I was pregnant. That felt like too much information all at once, and I worried it would send them over the edge. At the time of the wedding I was about 4 months along and able to hide the bump under my dress, so I planned to tell them about the baby later, after the wedding. Their reaction to my engagement was mixed. My mom got teary and asked if I was sure I wanted to do this. My dad was quiet and clearly displeased, asking if I truly trusted that this was right. I reassured them that I loved my fiancé and this was what I wanted. In the end, they agreed to come to the wedding, but it was obvious they weren't thrilled. I was just relieved they didn't outright refuse to attend. I hoped that maybe once they saw us together, they'd come around eventually. On my wedding day, the ceremony itself went smoothly. My parents showed up and even behaved politely for the most part. Right before the ceremony, my mom pulled me aside and quietly asked one more time if I was absolutely sure about going through with it. I told her yes, I was sure. She sighed but nodded and returned to her seat. The ceremony was beautiful and I was so happy to have my dad walk me down the aisle. After we exchanged vows, my parents congratulated us without drama. I really thought things might be okay. Unfortunately, that hope was short-lived. Our ceremony and reception were at 2 different venues. When we arrived at the reception hall, I realized my parents were nowhere to be found. I eventually got a hold of my brother, who told me he had contacted our parents and they informed him that they had gone home. The only explanation they gave was that they were tired and uncomfortable. They didn't even tell me directly, they just left. I was stunned and heartbroken. I had to finish my wedding reception pretending everything was fine, but inside I was a mess. My husband could tell something was wrong and did his best to comfort me with little touches and reassuring looks, which kept me from completely falling apart. I remember sneaking away to the bathroom at one point and just crying for a couple of minutes, trying not to smudge my makeup. What should have been the happiest day of my life had this undercurrent of misery because my own parents walked out on it. My husband noticed something was wrong and squeezed my hand, and a few close friends asked me quietly if I was okay. I just lied that my parents weren't feeling well. In the days after the wedding, I tried to reach out to my parents to talk about what happened. Every call went unanswered. I discovered they'd blocked my number and even blocked me on social media. The only way I could think to reach them was via email, so I wrote them a long, heartfelt letter. I told them that I was an adult making my own choices, that I loved my husband, and that I hoped they could accept that. I even shared the news that I was expecting their grandchild, thinking it might soften their hearts. I also said in that email that if, someday, they could accept my choices and my marriage, I would be open to talking again and rebuilding things. Then I hit send and waited. Days, weeks, months passed, and I got nothing back. They never responded. Not a word. They had ghosted me completely. Fast forward 5 years, I have not heard a peep from my parents since my wedding day. They made zero effort to contact me in all that time. It hurt a lot, especially during the milestones like the birth of our children, when I realized my parents truly weren't there at all. I lost count of the times I almost picked up the phone to call them, like when our first child was born, but I always lost my nerve, afraid of being rejected again. I grieved the loss of my parents in my life, and eventually I accepted that this was their choice. My husband's parents became our only set of grandparents. They were wonderful to us, which I'm grateful for, but it also reminded me of what I was missing. Still, I tried to focus on my own little family and move forward. By the time I was pregnant with our third, I truly didn't expect to ever hear from mom and dad again. A few months ago, on our 5th anniversary, I broke my social media silence to post a celebratory message. In it, I mentioned that it was our 5th wedding anniversary and casually noted that we have 2 kids and 1 more on the way. It wasn't directed at my parents or anything, just an update for friends. Well, wouldn't you know, my parents saw that post somehow. Out of the blue, I got a voicemail from my mom and dad. I was shocked just seeing my mom's number on my phone. In the message, they sounded upbeat and said they had no idea I'd had children. My mom said they really wanted to meet their grandkids and catch up. Hearing their voices after all this time floored me. I didn't respond immediately, and over the next couple of weeks they left a few more messages. In those, they sounded increasingly impatient and hurt that I wasn't replying. My dad said something like, "Enough time has passed, don't you think? We just want to see the little ones." My mom in another message said they missed me and begged me not to shut them out. It was a lot to process. I played the messages for my husband, who told me that I didn't have to rush into anything I wasn't comfortable with. My brother, who still speaks to my parents occasionally, also chimed in. He felt that I might be being a bit unfair if I didn't give mom and dad a chance, since I had told them in that email years ago that I'd be open to talking if they came around. Now it seemed like they were trying, at least on the surface. I feel completely torn. My initial gut instinct is that 5 years of total silence is just too long, and it's hard not to see their sudden interest as purely about the kids rather than a genuine desire to make amends with me. It really feels like they only care now because I have children they want to meet, not because they've accepted my marriage or regret how they treated us. On the other hand, I keep thinking about the message I sent in that email 5 years ago. I basically told them, if you can respect my choices, we can talk. I never put an expiration date on that. Now they're reaching out and I'm the one hesitating. Am I being hypocritical? I honestly never expected them to stay away this long, so maybe I did imagine an unofficial time limit in my head. They still haven't apologized or explicitly said we accept your marriage, all they've said is they want to meet the kids. That makes me very wary. At the same time, I do miss my parents. A part of me yearns for things to be okay with them. My oldest has even started asking about why he only has one set of grandparents, so the idea of my parents coming back and meeting the kids is tempting in some ways. But I'm terrified of letting them back and only to be hurt again, and to risk my kids getting hurt if my parents reject us once more. I keep seesawing between wanting to slam the door shut in their faces and feeling like I should give them a chance because they're my mom and dad. I truly don't know what the right move is. Edit, I didn't know how to mention this earlier, but another thought has been eating at me. My husband isn't white, while my parents and I are. I never thought my parents were racist, and neither did my husband. They never showed overt signs of that before. If they were, why would they care about meeting our mixed-race kids now? I doubt this is the reason, but I can't completely ignore the possibility. I genuinely hope I'm wrong and that race isn't a factor, but I wanted to put that out there. Should I reach out to them at this point? If I do, how would we even begin rebuilding the relationship after everything that's happened? Update. TLDR, they're racists. After reading all the advice and thinking it through, I decided to reach out to my parents and have a direct conversation. Yesterday, I sent them a brief message saying I was willing to talk, and within an hour we were on a Zoom call together. It was me, my husband, and both of my parents on the video chat. I was nervous as hell, literally trembling as I clicked the join meeting button, but I also felt a weird resolve. I was going to get some answers. As soon as our faces popped up on camera, I felt my heart skip. They looked a bit older than I remembered. My mom had new lines on her face and already appeared teary-eyed, and my dad's expression was stiff and nervous. My mom managed a trembling smile through her tears and my dad gave a terse nod. They quickly asked if they could see the kids, almost like they expected we'd bring our children onto the call right then and there to introduce them. I held up a hand and said, calmly, that we needed to talk first. I made it clear that, eventually, they might get to meet the kids, but only if my husband and I felt sure that it was going to be a healthy situation. I told them that they would have to earn our trust back and genuinely convince us that they would be positive, respectful influences in our children's lives. My parents looked a bit taken aback that I wasn't immediately agreeing, but they nodded. My mom said, of course, we understand. My dad muttered something about just being happy to see me. There was a tense, polite silence for a moment, as none of us seemed to know how to start the real conversation. Then my mom said they had something to share with me. She held up a piece of paper and explained that they had written me a letter on my wedding day, but never sent it. I was surprised and honestly a bit skeptical. Still, I said okay, and she began to read from it. Her voice was shaky as she read their words from 5 years ago. Essentially, the letter said that my parents were uncomfortable with me marrying my former boss. They claimed they were worried that he might have taken advantage of me or pressured me into the relationship because of the power dynamic. They wrote that they left between the ceremony and reception to avoid making a scene or objecting in public, but they wanted me to know they were there for me if I ever needed them, despite their issues with my husband. According to the letter, they had intended to send it the day after the wedding. However, when they received my angry email telling them they needed to respect my choices if they wanted to be in my life, they felt ashamed and didn't know how to respond. My mom's voice cracked as she read the part about seeing our anniversary post last week. The letter said that realizing how much they had missed in 5 years absolutely crushed them, and that they really didn't want to miss out on our lives anymore. By the time she finished reading, my mom had actual tears running down her cheeks, and even my dad's eyes were misty. It was a lot to take in. Watching my mother cry as she read those words, I felt a confusing mix of sympathy and anger. A part of me was moved that they might have felt remorse back then, another part of me was furious that they never actually sent the letter or reached out until now. I sat there for a moment, absorbing what I'd just heard. I told them I appreciated them sharing the letter, but I had questions. So many questions. First, I asked plainly what the real problem was with me marrying my former boss, because from where I stood, we handled everything correctly and were obviously happy together. Why was that so intolerable to them that they'd cut me off? My dad cleared his throat and said something like, "It just wasn't what we had envisioned for you, not for your wedding day, not for your future husband." My mom nodded along, dabbing her eyes. That answer irked me, it was so vague. I pressed further, asking why they even bothered coming to the wedding at all if they didn't support the marriage. At that, my dad looked a little uncomfortable. He finally admitted, I wanted to walk my daughter down the aisle. I figured it would be the only chance I'd get." That statement hung in the air like a bomb. He said my daughter in a weirdly detached way, not even looking at me when he said it. Immediately, I knew, and my husband picked up on it too, that my father wasn't really talking about me. He was referring to my older sister, who passed away years ago, and to the fact that he'd never get to be father of the bride for her. It was like he had mentally cast me as a stand-in for the daughter he lost, fulfilling her wedding scenario, not mine. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I went quiet, feeling a mix of hurt and anger boil inside me. My husband, seeing I was getting upset, stepped in at that point. He spoke up calmly but firmly. "If you're talking about my name," he said, "then address her directly. She's your daughter too, sitting right here." I saw my dad flinch a bit when my husband said that. Then my husband continued, still in a measured tone, "Look, if you had planned all along to only come for half the wedding, you should have told us. If we'd known you didn't truly want to be there, we wouldn't have insisted on you coming and certainly wouldn't have had you walk her down the aisle just to leave right after. And as for reaching out after 5 years, I'm sorry, but shame is a pretty weak excuse for abandoning your daughter. I'm a father now, and I can't imagine doing that to one of my kids. Help us understand how you could ignore her for so long and only speak up when you found out about the children." He wasn't raising his voice, but you could hear the restrained anger and disbelief in his words. I was grateful to him for saying what I was thinking. My dad's face had gone beet red as my husband spoke. And that's when everything truly fell apart. My father suddenly snapped, his voice loud and furious. "I'm not going to sit here and take this from a coochie," he shouted. The word coochie is a derogatory slur meaning dark-skinned. It's a pretty old-school racist term, and that's what my dad chose to call my husband in that moment. I felt like I had been slapped across the face. My jaw literally dropped. I was in absolute shock that those words came out of my father's mouth. My mother gasped and grabbed my dad's arm as if to stop him. She immediately started sputtering something like, "Oh my God, stop, no, that's not what we," trying to do damage control. But it was too late. My husband went rigid next to me, and I felt my face go hot with anger and betrayal. I had heard enough. I ended the call right then and there. I didn't even say goodbye. With shaking hands I just clicked the red end call button and disconnected, cutting off whatever my mother was trying to say. I was so angry and disgusted I couldn't even think straight. My parents tried to reach out again almost immediately. First they attempted to call back on Zoom, which I ignored, and then my phone started buzzing with text messages from my mom's number. I didn't reply. Frankly, I was in tears at that point. My husband and I just sat together on the couch afterwards while I tried to process what had happened. He put his arm around me and let me vent and sob. I couldn't believe that after all these years of wondering and second-guessing, the real reason for my parents' behavior was so ugly and so simple. In the hours and days after that blow-up, my parents sent me several long messages trying to explain themselves. The gist of their explanation was, yes, my father used a horrible word, but, according to them, that didn't mean they were actually racist. They rationalized it by saying he was just angry at my husband for disrespecting them, and that he never would have used such language in front of our kids, like somehow that made it okay. They still asked if they could meet the children, as if this was just a minor bump in the road. To me, those justifications made everything so much worse. It was clear they didn't truly understand what they'd done wrong, or they didn't think it was a big deal. It felt like they just didn't want to face any consequences. I spent 5 years agonizing over how my parents could have been so offended by me marrying my boss that they'd cut me out of their lives. I often wondered if I'd misjudged the situation, if there was some way to fix it or some angle I hadn't considered. Later that day, I called my brother and told him everything. He was horrified at what our dad said. I could hear him trying to process it, and he ended up apologizing to me for ever thinking I was too harsh. At least now he understood why I had been so cautious. Now, it turns out the truth is painfully straightforward, they're just racist. Maybe that's not the only issue, they certainly had hang-ups about me marrying my boss and their unresolved feelings about my sister, but the racism is what pushed it over the edge and it's what they revealed when pressed. In a messed up way, it's almost a relief to have an answer. It's not the answer I wanted, far from it, but at least now I know it wasn't because I had done something terribly wrong or because my relationship was inherently flawed. The problem was them all along. If it had just been the boss/employee issue or even the weird expectations around my sister's memory, I might have been able to work through that with them over time. I might have found some empathy for their concerns and maybe, just maybe, we could have reconciled. But discovering that my parents harbor racist feelings toward my husband, and, by extension, toward our children, was the deal-breaker. There's no coming back from that in my book unless they did some serious soul-searching and changed fundamentally as people, which seems extremely unlikely. Their defensive messages afterward showed me they're nowhere near that point. So, as heartbreaking as it is, my decision is made. I'm not going to expose my children, my beautiful, innocent mixed-race babies, to a couple of racists, even if those racists happen to be their grandparents. My parents chose to walk out of my life 5 years ago, and now I finally understand the full truth behind that choice. It hurts to accept, but at least I can truly move forward now without any guilt. In the end, protecting my family from harm, even if that harm comes from my own flesh and blood, is my top priority, and that's what I intend to do.